Hello, I'm Carolyn Holzman, and this is Confessions of an SEO. These weekly confessions run 15 minutes, give or take. Season 6 is an exploration into the physics of information extraction from all this web content by the AI models, specifically speaking, the GEO citations. Welcome to episode 25 of season 6. I'm calling it the GEO Paradox. How following popular SEO advice to protect your brand is actively engineering your exclusion. So let's talk about this. I'm watching the promotional posts of all the latest marketing summits that want to focus on artificial intelligence, understanding who you are, what you do, and where you do it. And I'm reading the panic-driven headlines, things like, better get in now or your brand will be locked out of AI. They are well-meaning, I think, in the desire to help brands. But to be honest, it is snake oil all the same. They're telling you that the AI search window is closing. They're telling you that ChatGPT, Perplexity, and Google's AI overviews are locking in their top 3 recommendations. And if you don't deploy mass automated agentic workflows to flood the zone with hundreds of page variations, you will be locked out forever. So here's what the truth actually is. Doing exactly what these SEO gurus are telling you to do to protect your brand. And I understand how attractive that is if you're a decision maker. However, in reality, actively, you do what they say. You are actively engineering the exclusion of your brand. Hence, the GEO paradox. So what these leaders are intending, they're helping brands. They want them to secure visibility in a rapidly shifting environment. I get it. But what they're telling you they're going to do is not remotely adjacent to the actual physics of AI extraction, which would achieve it. So let's talk about the laws of computational economics and why your high-volume automated strategy is a ticking time bomb. Okay, so the most common defense from this automated crowd is, but Carolyn, we tested it. We ran a query on Perplexity and our brand got cited. Okay, but this is a mirage, and it is a dangerous mirage. They are failing to distinguish between 2 completely different retrieval states in modern AI. The first one is call it runtime retrieval. That's the on-the-fly RAG. That's the RAG and go. And then there's a sort of 2 different things that are happening. I call them batch ingestions. So I do that so that I keep it straight so I don't let any legacy SEO stuff kind of get into here. But semantic settlement is when a model adds to their permanent records. All right. And so they have to go through a process because if they stayed with the RAG and go, that's expensive. So they want to move to a cheaper model. So part of that is if they absorb knowledge into their permanent documents, it's much cheaper for them to maintain that at the ready and just share that in these citations. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you a story. When you run a live query in one of these models, the AI engine triggers that runtime retrieval, that immediate sort of spur of the moment, if we call it. And I've used this term RAG before. Those that don't know it, it's called Retrieval Augmented Generation. Basically, it's like an open book exam for these AI models. They can go out and they can search on their own and look things up. Now, because these platforms, when they do this, they are aggressively burning up cash to win market share. So what they do is they subsidize this incredibly expensive process. Notice, while some have subscriptions, for the most part, if you just go into most search engines, you'll be able to get some version of AI responding on that. But the bottom line is they're trying to win market share. So they won't charge you for it directly. And what they do when you ask your random question, they send a crawler to fetch a live URL. They spin up a headless browser, execute. Typically on sites, there's a lot of JavaScript that's going on client side, and they extract the text. Now, going back to the people who said, but we tested it and it worked. Yes, you see the citation and you think you've won, only you haven't, because that page is a temporal external variable, meaning that's not permanent. That's just what they went out and found and kind of pulled out of thin air. Now, meanwhile, we continue in our story. To stay profitable, AI engines cannot run live dynamic fetches for billions of daily queries forever and ever. So they are actively looking to see if there's content, branded content even, that they can allow to go into their permanent knowledge. These are the documents that they refer to without having to go do these external searches. Now, during major core updates in Google, what we've seen is the engine ceases the expensive real-time lookups. What it's doing during these core updates now is it's gathering links and packaging some of the what they call the web relationships into the permanent static knowledge. It's pre-calculated database of ready-to-go citations. So that is, I consider that to be a semantic settlement. It's kind of like saying, we'll take you, but we won't take you, but we'll take you, but all of you guys go. Now, when the settlement begins with a core update, that expensive dynamic RAG bridge is pulled. So if your site cannot be parsed into raw static HTML, you are operationally locked out of the database, the one that they keep ready to go for ready-to-go citations they don't have to pay a lot for. You're kind of locked out of that database for the entire quarter. I know this because they're running 4 every year. Okay, now here's the secret. There are 2 12-day windows. Having monitored and tested the indexation system daily myself for almost 5 years, I have watched Google's web rendering service, also known as WRS. They're so clever with their names. And I've watched it kind of behave a certain way. And what I've noticed is that that same semantic settlement process I just described is executed, I guess, like, let's call it a daily settlement. Okay, so first, this is outside of major updates. So when we publish new URLs, somehow between sitemaps and RSS feeds, Google places these URLs in a strict 12-day rolling monitoring window. The engine watches your raw HTML to rendered DOM symmetry over 12 days to verify basically that you're structurally stable. And they want to ensure that before you're even allowed near the main index. So if during that time your agentic URLs show dynamic shifts or broken code during this probationary window, Google relegates these URLs to the crawled, currently not indexed, and most of the time it's a graveyard. Now, the other 12-day window is, it's these core updates. It's a core update evaluation. And yeah, I'm talking about the most famous, dreaded Google update. What's happening now is that this is a 12-day macro level compute window that happens during the major update. So Google halts this active runtime lookup, processes the web rendering service queue, and compares the raw HTML to the rendered DOM and freezes what it finds that it can do quickly when they match. It freezes those default citation modes. So to survive either 12-day window, it's kind of like the two things. Your site must pass two separate tests. There's a flash extraction, and that's where it just pulls the raw HTML. It's just like sucks it right in. Then there's this Symmetry Gate check. This is where, and we've talked about this before, I've got a lot of previous content about this, where Google's rendering machine, basically it's a headless Chrome, and it checks to see if your raw HTML matches your rendered DOM. Did you tell the human the same thing you told the machine? Now, if they don't match one-to-one, the engine delivers a judgment. Your site is flagged as asymmetric, and it gets evicted. Now, we've talked about Symmetry Gate. You know, VizzEx has even created a tool. It's free for 3 and then free forever with an email. You can find it at symmetrygate.ai. And one cool little thing we added this past week is a machine token counter. Based on the content on your page, we can calculate current costs to commute a page like this into dollars and cents. So you'll get two versions. One is, your page as it is, and the other one is if you were using VizzEx. This is the kind of savings that you can amass. Pretty interesting. Check it out. All right. So most of the time, and certainly in the past few years, I've always thought that the core bottleneck in Google and search retrieval was storage. However, it is no longer storage. It is now the amount of money, time, and energy to compute the information, to take your page and figure out what it says. And every page is assessed a virtual compute tax. If your page is too expensive to parse, it's going to get discarded during the core update, and that is a massive batch process. So where are you triggering this tax, you may ask? So let's just look at some potential. And this would be like Symmetry Gate failures. So if you have deferred scripts, if you have, what do they call them? Hydration delays, meaning, you're lazy rendering your content. And you've got dynamic page builders. And when you do that, you force Google to have to unleash that headless Chrome to render your JavaScript. Well, that increases indexing costs up to like 1,000 times what they want it to be. And what happens is Google eventually gets to the point where it will no longer pay this tax. Now, the second one, this is the hashtag fragment collision. That sounds like an accident, and it is. Bless them. Respected SEOs love telling you that table of contents features where you have the hashtag and the anchor links on those table of content features, that they're okay, that anybody telling you differently doesn't know how helpful they are to the reader. So I'm going to say this again, like I have said since 2024. Use of traditional table of content links is total structural ignorance. Sorry, not sorry. The standard networking, the hashtag and the URL, you see it in your visual instruction. But when it's processed by the browser, it's stripped before it even reaches the server. But when an LLM, an AI model, tries to chunk your content naturally based on your heading hierarchy, the H1s, the H2, H3s, it encounters those hard-coded hashtag table of content links. So this parser's indexing algorithm gets confused. It has to run redundant, expensive deduplication loops to figure out if your brand.com/page hashtag section 1 is a duplicate of brand.com/page. So cha-ching to the AI, you're too expensive. And this collision between the client-side visual scrolling and the server-side semantic chunking, this is what spikes up those CPU cycles. The engine pays a heavy processing penalty to resolve what to it appears to be clutter. And this raises the tax on your page, and this excludes your brand when you're too expensive. So what is the cost of all of this really? I mean, if they're paying for it, who cares? Well, this brute force approach of generating hundreds of fan-out page variations is not just bad for your brand, it is a physical disaster for our environment. Running millions of headless Chrome loops over computationally toxic, unoptimized, not SEO unoptimized, but extraction unoptimized code consumes astronomical gigawatt hours of data center energy. Why do you think the demand for data centers just came out of nowhere and is now hitting a critical mark? Trillion-dollar AI parent companies are building massive data center facilities that are pushing these local power grids to the brink of collapse. And guess who's footing the bill? The financial burden of building new power substations, expanding grids, and diverting millions of gallons of local water for server cooling is falling heavily onto local municipalities and local taxpayers. It's happening in Texas. Our cities are subsidizing this infrastructure with absolutely zero stake in the immense profits of these AI parent companies. So I have to ask our industry a direct, probably uncomfortable question. Should we continue to provide strategic SEO guidance without knowing the actual realities of the extraction physics for these models, simply because these high-volume tactics seem to pass phase 1 testing? We have to stop recommending mass content generation because it tested well on a subsidized live RAG query is well-meaning but short-sighted. If our strategies do not stand up to the laws of computational economics, we are actively engineering our clients' exclusion out of these models. The future of search does not require more words. It requires reducing the engine's processing expense closer to zero. Now, normal listeners, regular listeners, this is the exact structural path that we've been pioneering at VizzEx with VizzEx Pro. We don't write copy. We compile structural integrity at the code level. And this allows you to meet that one-to-one Symmetry Gate math, as well as the algorithmic parity, which is the rendered DOM to schema connectivity. By making our site and other sites cheap and low cost to process and extract, these are the quiet domains that AI regards as highly trusted default citation sources. Now, these marketing leaders are right about one thing: timing. The time to shift is now. There will be winners and losers in this next era of search, but they won't be defined by who has the most content. They will be defined entirely by the economy of extraction. I'm Carolyn Holzman, and that's it for me this week. Confessions is sponsored exclusively by VizzEx. VizzEx Pro is our signature app. It helps you create content with the lowest computational cost to LLMs. It's available for WordPress and HubSpot. Go to VizzEx.ai. And remember, keep your signals clean, your HTML honest, and I'll see you next week on Confessions.